Hello, everybody. Welcome to ValCon. I hope that you are all doing well and that you've been enjoying. Today, I have a panel for you all about modding. We're hoping to get some of you more comfortable in this scene because modding is something that really helps people get a couple more thousand hours out of this incredible game. And a lot of people have frustrations with mods. And in this panel, we want to address some of that and address why that might be the case and encourage you all that mods are actually something that are wonderful and there's a mod for everybody. Let's get started with some introductions. Why don't we start with you, Balrond? How are you doing?
I'm fine. Thank you for having me here. I'm Balrond, 34 years old, programmer from Poland. Been with Valheim since it came out and became a mod developer very soon after it came out. Nowadays, I don't really play much the game itself, but I rather create stuff for the people to enjoy.
Yeah, I'm GG. I'm a bit of a mod developer, more of a content creator and a community host. I was originally a Valheim vanilla purist myself and delved into the world of modding, mostly for anti-cheat and anti-grief, and it just went down a dark hole from there.
And so you were involved in the alpha, right? So that was before,
That's correct, yes.
because most people learned about Valheim when it went early access and then got viral, right? I learned about it after that point. But so anyone involved in the alpha, just for those listening, they were involved with testing testing Valheim before it became early access. And I think that means you get that special cape, right?
Yeah, we have a special cape, special hood, and a drinking horn that we got for being part of that. Yeah, and I started about 2 weeks after he started developing the game back in 2018.
I'm Dhakhar. I make content on YouTube. I do not have a special cape or hood, unfortunately, but I did start playing in the early access. And I played through the game as a vanilla purist as well, and then eventually went looking for mods when I wanted to do some creative building, and found them very easy to install and use, and kind of haven't looked back since. And nowadays I'm making scripts to enable sort of modded gameplay on a vanilla server.
Hey, yeah, I go by Warp. My Thunderstore name is Warpalicious, but most people call me Warp. I'm a Valheim mod developer. I've been building mods for about a year now. And yeah, my whole goal as a mod developer is to make the world feel more alive and increase the amount of points of interest, dungeons, and just interesting things to find in the Valheim world. So a lot of my mods revolve around that concept.
So I think why don't to get started? Let's talk a little bit about something both of you mentioned, Dhakhar and also GG mentioned. Why do people feel that that is important to do? Like, why is it common to hear like, oh, when you first start playing the game, you should play it without a mod? You've heard this thing before, right? So could you elaborate? What's the mentality here?
I kind of agree with that statement, to be honest. I would say if anyone's trying Valheim for the first time, they should play it without a mod. That's certainly how I felt, and I only wanted to start looking into mods after I'd completed the game at the time. Um, I think there's something very valuable about the vanilla experience, and for me, it felt important to play the game as the developers intended before I then went looking for other things.
I agree with that as well. I mean, I feel like you should experience the game as it's intended the first time through. And then, depending on, for me, the love for the game was hosting a community, getting a lot of people involved. And, just alone, when you get above 10 players, you need a mod in order to make that work. So, and then if you want to protect your server, protect your build, make sure people aren't cheating, there are mods for that. So it started out as a necessity for me, but I do agree you should play it through vanilla first to experience everything.
I could agree on this myself. I think like it's always better to first understand the game, because later on, if you even want to get into the mods, you understand what you're looking for, what you want to experience more of the game itself, rather than dive it into someone's experience first that they created with their mods, with their setup.
That's an interesting point, because there's sort of a, let's call it a culture with, or a direction mods can take. They can take Valheim more to a different game, or they can take Valheim to more Valheim.
You've got players who maybe want to focus more on the building, so there's a ton of excellent building mods or world development mods, and then you have people who just maybe they don't like crafting 600 arrows before they go out, so they want a mod that's more of a quality of life mod that'll just streamline the crafting processes for them.
And then I think there's people who just want to find a little bit more of a challenge. So, for example, just tick their monsters a little bit up, right? Make it the game a little bit harder, not extremely, not that different game. Just make that playthrough a little bit longer, extending those little encounters.
Along the lines of what Dhakhar originally said, I think that's a really common reason. This concept of I want to play the game as the developers intended. A lot of mods revolve around changing, like you said, JP, these small game design decisions in the game. And I think the most obvious one that we all know about is that portals can't teleport metals. That was probably the story before world modifiers came out. But I think that people just want to change, and that might change the way the game is away from as the developers intended. I think that's generally the way that the modding scene has been portrayed in Valheim. But I think on JP's second point, from my experience in other modding communities, such as Skyrim, I've seen DLC size packs of content that are added to the game that are perfectly fit inside the game. What I really want people to know is that there are mods out there that you wouldn't even know aren't vanilla. So I don't think that all mods adhere to this idea that if you install it, it deviates from the developer's vision of the game or their intention of the game.
Well, and it'll relies on the individual player's perspective, right?
Yeah.
You can have two players who fundamentally feel one way or the other, and it's up to what they interpret.
Oh, I did hear that one too many times with my own mods, that I changed some of those rules in my own mods, and I had mixed opinion altogether, not knowing what to actually do with it, or just follow up with what I already did, or change it back, because so many people didn't agree with those changes because they were so fundamental, so well known and understood that they felt like this is a game changer.
That's come up a lot on Palm, and in general, I've found that if I change important mechanics during someone's playthrough, they're not going to like it. So I'm wondering, Balrond, do you think in your case where that happened, could it have been a timing thing with the players who were playing it? Or do you think that was going to happen regardless?
I think that some of those issues I had, one of was mentioned by the Warp, the portal. I changed it slightly, the rules of the portal. They said like a lot of people didn't like going with the metals, so it's like, okay, you can bring the metals through the portal, but you cannot bring items to summon bosses through the portal. And that flipped the rules upside down in this topic. But then I added one more thing. You're not smelting scrap metal in the forge anymore. You need a special receipt for it on the table on a specific level. And those two rules together about metals flipped the game upside down. And I think some of new players who just started a new server, a new playthrough, they were fine with it because it felt fresh. But some that wanted to just extend their playthrough or are really hung up on those rules didn't enjoy it. It's like what you said, wrong timing, wrong space, wrong user, wrong target.
Too drastic of a change.
Most players, they want to play a certain way, and they want to have control over being able to play that way. And this is something maybe we can help people understand a bit regarding the modding situation. Let's transition a bit. Each person will talk about how modding has enriched their Valheim experience. And I think this will help those who are listening understand that mods aren't just one thing. There's loads of different options.
I could start then. When it comes to me and modding, when I first played with the Valheim, I was like, it's fun, it's great. But me and my friends go through a playthrough based on 2 days, and it's like, we wanted something more. We wanted a little bit to extend the game, make it maybe a little bit harder, so it takes longer. So we first tried some mods. That was early on, so we had like Valheim Plus early version and just few other little configs here and there, no additional content really. And still, that wasn't really enough. So I deep dive into modding to try to get us just that little bit more content and that little bit more fun. We've seen the roadmap early on about great ideas, about sailing, about new dungeons, new stuff, and it's like, okay, like could be more interesting. I really enjoy sailing in Valheim, so I wanted to make it better. So that's how I ended up making the shipyard mod that I'm mostly known of, and I enjoy it to this day myself. Whenever I go for a little playthrough, I'm still always sailing my ships. I don't use portals in the game. I don't really enjoy portals. They take a little bit of that enjoyment of the world, of exploring it, or going deeper into it. So what I gained from modding was, well, knowledge, fun, and meeting a lot of people and being here in the very end. So modding became a big part of my life, actually.
I've definitely gotten the impression just from listening to you that you have a lot of fun with it. You seem like you really enjoy it.
Both way, using it or playing with this or playing without it, meeting with people online to even chit chat a little bit, create mods, get bad comments about my mods, fix the mods, do it all again. It was a journey, and it still is a journey, and I'm very happy that I ended up here.
That's beautiful. What about you, Gigi?
I started out mostly a vanilla purist, but when my community started getting bigger, our concept that I had worked on since early alpha was this clan wars concept, and it's this RP PvP type of world, and it's based on having clans of people who fight over resources, who fight through progression. And we quickly learned that there were a lot of things that the game just inherently did not support. Anybody who's tried to PvP in Valheim knows that it lacks a lot. So, we have mods that tweak the PvP a little bit to make it a little more balanced. The sword is very imbalanced in PvP. You quickly find in a world where you're trying to get everybody fighting at the same level that people know how to cheese the bosses and get later game gear early on. So we started implementing progression restriction mods to make everybody go at sort of the same pace, or at least you had to fight all the bosses to get, to point B, and so on and so forth. And I think that's where, for us, the mods are most important. And then we started finding that, the world feels a little empty. Even with all these mobs you have to fight, where are the other Vikings? Why are we the only ones that exist? So we started delving into like other NPC mods and stuff like that. So, I think, but for us, the core is always, our clan war system. So we're always trying to figure out how to make PvP better, those interactions better. We use the guilds mod, which allows you to clan up better. That way, when you're fighting in those environments, that you're not killing your own clan mates, you're only killing the enemy.
Let's move on to Dhakhar. How did mods change Valheim for you, Dhakhar?
Pretty drastically. I got into them mostly when I'd sort of finished my playthrough of the game and wanted to do creative building. And the main thing I was looking for was to delete trees and rocks en masse rather than mining and chopping them down. I wanted to create a big free open area to do some building in. So I went looking for a mod to solve that and stumbled upon Infinity Hammer, which in hindsight was kind of like using a bazooka to kill a fly because it's way overkill for what I needed, but it did the job. And it did the job so well, I decided to look what else it could do. And then Valheim kind of became playing that mod and finding out what it could do. And you can just build anything with it. It's really crazy. If you're into creative building and you've not tried Infinity Hammer, I very strongly recommend you give it a go. And then I looked at the other mods from that creator, Yera, and got really into those as well with world edit commands and server dev commands that just allow you to use Valheim as the true sandbox, create your own worlds, your own areas, and really fiddle with the game, do any kind of creative building, break all of the pre-existing rules. It's really just a fabulous development toolkit in a way for playing the game. Yeah, so I've got a few extra 1,000 hours out of the game just from sort of playing those mods, even though they're not really content mods. They're building assistance mods and tools and that sort of thing.
Dhakhar, for example, has made with 9byte and the others this adventure map, right? Which is arguably the most popular customized Valheim world. And like, could you have done that without Infinity Hammer, Dhakhar?
No. Or like, if yes, then it would have taken 90 times longer. Just the speed at which you can build things with Infinity Hammer when you get used to how it works and how to use all of its functions, it just blows away what you could do with anything else. Being able to place multiple blocks at the same time, copy, select areas, repeat, mirror. You can just construct entire areas in an hour that would take hundreds of hours potentially otherwise. So yeah, it's really invaluable for that sort of thing. If you want to do any type of world building, for sure, give it a look.
Is there anything else about Infinity Hammer, Dhakhar, that made you really feel like that enabled that adventure map stuff? Because you said things can be built faster, but is it really just faster, or what made Infinity Hammer more fun for you?
It's so deep that it's a multi-stage process. There were things in the beginning that absolutely blew my mind that you could do. But I'd say every few months I stumble across something else that it can do, or even things that were not intended. So if you've seen some of my videos, I do like animations in them, which is done through using Infinity Hammer as well, even though it's completely unintended. I'm just taking a copy of something, so all of the pieces are on the hammer, and then using nudging or move of that object. So I'm sort of frame animating stop motion with pieces. So that was not intended at all. And I think that kind of thing, and also really all of my builds since getting Infinity Hammer, I've not built anything remotely Valheim-y, Viking-y. Everything is just, how can I push this tool to the limit? Like, can I actually build something that's completely unintended for this game universe? Yeah, like I said, it's been playing the mod has become the game.
I see. So it's the depth came from the fact that you couldn't just learn Infinity Hammer overnight. There's more things that you can learn, and that adds depth, which then makes the whole building experience more rewarding. All right, so what about you, Warp? How has modding influenced your Valheim experience?
I'd say that my favorite thing about Valheim is the procedurally generated world. So, I played a lot of games growing up, and I really loved Skyrim, but I just didn't love that it was the same world every time. I think it's an amazingly designed world, but I love the idea when a game is procedurally generated, so it just offers, limitless exploration. And so that was my favorite thing about Valheim. And playing Valheim, I really love to explore. I love to find new areas of the environment and find new biomes and find new things. But I started to notice that as I explored more, I would see a biome, and eventually you kind of see all the content in a biome. And then you start to get this unfortunate feeling of, well, I've already seen everything there is in the meadows or the Black Forest. There's a Black Forest or meadows here far out in the world. I'm just going to skip it because I know what's in it. And I've seen this problem recurringly spoken about on Reddit. And personally, I'm somebody who I love to solve problems. I love to build things. And when I build things, I want them to solve a problem. So I wanted to build mods that would solve this world exploration problem. I wanted to build mods that would encourage people to explore more of the Valheim world. I wanted to give them a reason to go to the meadows that's, far, far out, or the Black Forest bordering the Mistlands out in the world. Over the last year, I learned to build mods, and I had a lot of help from a lot of community members in the modding community to teach me how to mod. I think I have now like 18 mods. Most of them are a part of what I call my More World Location series. In total now I've added 86 new custom locations, dungeons, and traders. And the whole idea here is to give people more reason to go out into the world and find them. One thing that's so cool about the Valheim community is that people love to build things. People like Dhakhar, build these incredible builds, and we have this whole infrastructure in the community to share that, like Valheimians, where people post these builds. And actually, every single location in my mods is not built by me. It's built by a community member. I used it with their permission, of course. But it also acts as this amazing sort of flywheel effect of there's people in the world who love to build, and then there's people in the world who love to explore. And my mods can sort of connect those two. It can act as a connector between those two people in the world, where I can take the build that somebody loved to make, and then I can put it in the world for somebody to find in exploration.
And in doing so, you enrich that builder's experience as well. Because a lot of builders, they want to build things that get used. And so I'd like to piggyback off of what Warp said here and pose this to one of you as a question. Why does Valheim become predictable?
I could start. I think it's a very good question because even if it's a procedural generated world, right? Even if we have the randomized map, to some extent, there is a finite amount of options that are still there that need to create some kind of a road, needs to follow a certain pattern. Even if it's randomized, there's still a pattern that will repeat every single game. So it becomes predictable to very big extent. What you're gonna do, what is the next step, how you're gonna go forward for it, what you're gonna see, what you're gonna experience. And that limits the playability to some extent. In the bigger picture, it's that predictability that stays there.
What do you think, Gigi?
I think, like Balrond said, the intention of the original developers, you've got situations where, you know how the Grey Dwarfs are going to move when you fight them. You know how every mob is going to move once you've played through it enough. And, I think it's by design, really. You can create some variants by, saying, okay, this run through, I'm not going to use a bow. I'm only going to use a spear. I'm only going to use a sword. So you can sort of trick your own mind in the predictability of things there. But I mean, circling back around, that's kind of where mods come involved because they can change those predictabilities up.
So would you say that you feel that you can't find something new in that meadow because you've already observed what produces a meadow?
You already know what's going to be in there. You know it's going to be Grey Dwarfs. You know it's going to be boars. You know it's going to be, it's always going to be the same elements in there. And you do get a little bit of variance as you progress through the bosses because, like eventually the fuelings show up in the meadows. A little bit more variance to that might help break up the predictability a little bit. But yeah, absolutely.
Well, yeah, I think there are a lot of sort of linear design decisions in the game, such as, the progression of difficulty through the biomes. The gear is definitely very linear, as opposed to, sort of an ARPG design of something like Diablo or Path of Exile, where all the stats are randomized. So I guess it is kind of interesting that the map of Valheim is, I think, one of the most random and excellent executions of procedural generation there is out there. But other systems in the game aren't don't necessarily follow that.
They're fully
principle.
linear. That is such, you just hit the nail on the head there. Yeah, that's the mismatch, because it is this amazing procedurally generated world. For the sense of exploration to be valid, the player needs to feel that there is something unknown. Without that, what are you exploring? Right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and to a degree, I think I definitely have I think I've contributed to the problem in a big way. Like there's 86 new locations to find, and there's 20 instances of them in the world. So 86 times 20, you guys do the math. But it still actually suffers from the same problem of, like somebody might discover all of my locations and then the same problem exists. I guess, I understand from, having designed all these locations, I get it now. It takes so much time as a game studio to build this level of content. It's why Starfield by Bethesda was in development for so many years. And it's why these massive RPGs take so long. So it makes sense. But, I think that to a degree, mods can sort of contribute to the randomization that people experience in the game. And so I hope that my mods have, and they add to the new experience of finding a meadows.
As Warp mentioned, the same things will still occur. Just because you have a really cool dungeon doesn't mean it's rewarding for the player to get something there more than once, right? Because once they've explored it, what?
Yeah.
Right? So what do you think? How can that problem be addressed?
Well, one thing is quite interesting. A lot of what Warp was saying with the extra locations and that sort of thing is something that Ninebite and I considered a lot when creating the adventure map, but also coming at it from the opposite direction. So because ours is not a random generation and all the locations are pre-built, we're sort of hijacking the single player RPG non-procedurally generated style. So we have some areas of the map that were pre-generated, but then a lot of our locations are custom built, and that again solves part of the problem because people are playing it and they don't know what's going to be around the corner because it could be any kind of build that they've not seen before. But then when they've played it once, they've seen it all, and it's the exact same problem. We just ended up there from a different route. So it's a difficult one to solve. And kind of on that point as well, with the procedural generation, you sometimes end up with these amazing parts of landscape, like really tall mountains with sheer cliffs or wide open plains. But when you've seen a plains or a meadows or a mountains, you know it's just going to be any other mountain. It's the same kind of thing, but it just looks cool. Whereas in other types of games, when you see the really tall mountain, your brain thinks, I wonder what's up there. There must be something cool up there because it's the tallest mountain. And Valheim lacks a bit of that, which it doesn't reward the exploration side as much as it could.
Yeah, so I think it's a really, really interesting question. I think that I think the way to do it, the way to solve this, like, how do you solve for the linear? I think if we actually look at a really popular board game, which is Settlers of Catan, that game is also, I don't know if people know it, it's essentially like a game of trading resources. But there is one goal, and you play against other people, but there's many ways to achieve that goal. So I think that the way to add dungeons and add locations is to take a step back and really address not the sort of small micro decisions of finding a biome and what it's like, but look at the whole meta linear progression as a single story. And think of a full Valheim playthrough as a series of events and a series of problems and decisions that players are making, and then give them alternate pathways to achieve them. And I think that's what would really make, and what does make Valheim fun and other games fun, is you want to play it again because, like GGrNoob said, you can put these little restrictions on and like don't use a bow. So I think that the way to add custom dungeons and the way to add custom locations and just points of interest in general is to introduce alternate paths to the vanilla progression. And so one of the ways that I did this in my Underground Ruins mod was, I know that I think we can all relate that Black Forest, copper and tin and ultimately bronze acquisition is very unpleasant. And so I offered in the dungeon, I put copper nodes in the dungeon. So it's like the swamp, an alternate or sort of a dungeon crawling way of acquiring metal. So to answer your question, I think the way to do it is to sort of step back and look at the whole picture of how do people progress and then offer them sort of winding pathways. Because when you then tie together those pathways, it can then become something very unique. I don't know how to describe. You might think of it as like driving from point A to B. I took this road, then that road, then this road this time, but another time I took a whole different path.
To make sure I understand what you're talking about, you're basically saying that instead of just randomly placing things, you make the things so that they satisfy part of the game progression loop in an alternative way. So the first thing that comes to mind, a lot of Valheim building is gated by motor. So if the player knew that there is 3 dungeons on the map somewhere that give you motor's tiers without you fighting motor, is that an example of what you're saying?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's actually a really good example because I think you often see in multiplayer servers, there's this idea that we're going to schedule boss kills. Nobody's allowed to kill motor until Saturday, January 25th, But I think that it would be really interesting to have such an idea where, people said, hey, no, I'm gonna go do this dungeon. You're gonna go kill motor, and then hey, we're gonna meet on the other side.
We cannot really go absolutely away from the linear pattern, the board game that Valheim is, but as Ward mentioned, we can add additional pathways here and there. Similar to his, I, for example, added that the scrap metal drops from different monsters on different biomes, so you can always find some extra metal. If you don't like mining and you find it boring, just go hunt for monsters. Eventually you will get the same amount of metal yourself. And it also solves the problem that you can dig up all the metal in your world and you end up like, I still need more. Like, what's next? Well, go slay some monsters. This problem is solved there. But also the pathways, as you mentioned yourself, JP, about tables and being gated there with the content. Why not give even, let's say, more content and more reasons for player to go do something, as I said, in a different way to get to the same point, but don't block it. Just give them an option. The goal is still there. It's just different ways to achieving the same goal and getting into the next step where, again, you have multiple choices to make.
I just want to say one last thing on this point of these pathways. I think that what really a sort of foundational principle in game design is that it's really exciting as a player to make trade-offs and to decide amongst trade-offs, to make decisions and say, I'm this type of player, I want to play this way, so I'm going to decide to go left as opposed to right, because left is better for what I want to do. And so I think that, finding ways to introduce more of that is great. And honestly, I think that Iron Gate, even in the vanilla game, is starting to embrace that more. The new skills from the Bog Witch, I think, are leaning into this idea that we know there's some people who go out and explore, and we know there's some people who are at the base. Let's give both of them a progression system to get better.
I've heard the developers internally think of it as ABC, adventure, building, combat, as like the 3 different groups of players. I think whichever one you fall into, you can find some mod that enhances your experience or fixes a problem that you think the game has.
Yeah, absolutely.
In this realm of like, there's people who may feel hesitant about mods. What do you want to tell them?
Take it from somebody who was a purist. Give some mods a try.
From point of a mod maker, go give it try some mods, see what suits yourself. Try to create your own gameplay. And if you still don't find everything fine for you, go try to make your own mod and create your own story.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with both of those statements. And you should check out some communities online. Everyone's super friendly in the modding community if you need help or guidance or want to know which mod might be best for you.
Yeah, I would say think of mods as like a DLC to add so much more content to your game. And it's free.
Free is always the best price.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. I hope that you enjoy ValCon, and make sure to check out some of the other panels. It's a great way to get a taste of what's possible in a modded Valheim world.